afternoon. I am your Friday hostess, Natalie. Today's topic is spirit, our experiences with the spirit world, things that have happened to us that connect us to spirit. Now, this varies a little bit from last week when we talked about the elemental spirit. This week, for me at least, this is differentiated by our experiences in our contact with those in the spirit realm or things that have occurred in the spirit plane or the astral plane. So my experiences personally, I've had several that have occurred throughout my life. The earliest one that I can think of was when I was very young. I would talk to people, things that were there, shadows that I could see that nobody else could see, and my mom used to think I was a little, or that I had imaginary friends, which they weren't imaginary, but that was beside the point. As I got a little bit older, it kind of evolved into slightly different things. One of the earliest things that I can remember being older was I am typically a very deep sleeper. And one night I woke up because I felt someone sit on my bed and someone was stroking my hair, and I thought it was my mother. And I didn't want her to know that she'd woken me up, so I kind of peeked out from my blanket, and there was very clearly an indention in the bed, but there was no one there. And I could feel this person touching my hair. And my first instinct was to, kind of freeze up, but then I thought, obviously, whoever it was not there to hurt me, or they would have done so. So I just kind of waited, and eventually it just sort of faded off. I can't really say that I felt whatever it was get up, but it just sort of stopped. It was kind of strange. And a few years after that, I was asleep and I woke up and I saw this figure walk past my door towards my parents' bedroom. And it was very clear. It was kind of odd because it was a glowing kind of figure, bluish in color. It was very strange, of a tall woman that I didn't recognize. She was dressed in Victorian period clothing, which was also very strange because my neighborhood was relatively new at the time, really didn't have any history that I knew of in terms of anything that may have happened there. I suppose it's possible that during the westward expansion through Texas something may have happened on the property, but nothing that we knew of. There was no history that we know of. And this person was moving very slowly, almost like you would see a bride walking. She had the bustle. I remembered her dress. It had several sheers and folds, and very lovely. She never turned and looked at me. She just was looking straight and walked towards my parents' room. And I instantly became very fearful for my parents' safety, which was kind of strange. So I jumped up out of bed and ran down the hall. Of course, there was nothing there, but I ran into the room and I got into bed with them, and I slept for several months in my parents' room because it just unnerved me. But I've always had kind of issues with my parents' bedroom. And one of the strange things that would happen to me while I was growing up, when I was very young, I was born in Colorado, and we moved to San Antonio, to Live Oak, Texas specifically. It's a little bit suburb kind of outside of San Antonio, on the north side of San Antonio. We moved to Live Oak when I was in the middle of my first grade year. We moved during Christmas break of my first grade year. Prior to that time, like I said, I had kind of imaginary friends, things that I could see and hear that nobody else could, but I just kind of thought it was my imagination. My mom always chalked it up to my imagination. I was very, very little. So when we moved to San Antonio and I got older, other things started to happen that were kind of odd or unusual. And one of the things that always unnerved me was the fact that we used to just do experiments with this just to see because it was so strange. But anybody could walk into my parents' bedroom and the door would stay open. When I walk into my parents' bedroom, the door closes. And we're not talking it's like a movement of the wind, it rushes and it shuts. We're talking it's a slow, deliberate, complete shutting with a click of the door. Very strange. And one time, my parents used to do this thing called midnight bowling, which is where they would go to the bowling alley. My mom and dad were friends with the owner and with the manager of the bowling alley and her husband. And they used to do this midnight bowling, which is where they would go and they would turn off all the lanes and all the lights in the bowling alley except for the lane lights. And my parents would bowl and you could win prizes, like we would win trips to Corpus Christi and things like that. So I kind of got tired of hanging out in the bowling alley all night till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. So I would stay home. By this point I was 11 or 12, so my parents kind of thought I was old enough to stay home. My sister was out of the house at this point. She had just recently left the house. And I was reading a series of books called the Dark Forces books. And this was an interesting set of books. I don't really know the origin of the books, and I don't think that they're sold or in print anymore. But I was a doll collector. I've been a doll collector since I was a very small girl, because my grandmother, when we would come down from Denver to San Antonio for vacation, my grandmother would always have a new doll for me. She handmade dolls for me. So I started collecting dolls. So after that, it went to porcelain dolls, and I have rather a sizable collection of dolls. So I was very interested in this book because it was about a girl who collected dolls, and she happened to go to this like little carnival type fair that came to their neighborhood with her boyfriend, and she sees this doll and she just instantly feels this connection to this doll. She must have this doll. And so it starts out with, she's holding the darts because it's one of those balloon toss, balloon dart games, and the person in front of her boyfriend is about to win the doll for his girlfriend, and she doesn't even realize she does it, but she basically throws the darts and hits him in the ankle, and anyhow, she wins the doll. The doll ends up being possessed. It starts to grow and look more like her and take over her mind more. Basically, it's going to take over her life. So I'm reading this book, and it's probably about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and the way my parents' house was set up, you would walk in the front door, and there was like a little mini step about that tall that would step off into the dining room. When you walk in the front door, immediately to your left was the dining room. You could walk straight, and there's like a little linen closet here, and then you would step off that little step, and immediately to your right would be the hallway with bedrooms. So it was a bathroom, a bedroom, my parents' bedroom at the end of the hall, my dad's study, my bedroom, or it used to be my sister's bedroom. We switched bedrooms when she moved out. And then you'd be in the living room, and they had 2 sliding glass windows with a fireplace in the middle. And then it went into the kitchen, and the kitchen connected to the dining room. So basically it made like a little circle between the dining room entryway and the living room. And I'm sitting in this chair that was right in front of the hallway, and I'm reading this book, and all of a sudden I get this overwhelming sensation of being watched. And I kind of look up, and the curtains are closed on the sliding glass door, so it wasn't my dog, who had to stay outside. My mom didn't want the dog in the house. And I'm like, that is so weird. So I just kept reading, and I just kept getting this weird feeling that I was being watched. And it wasn't a good kind of watched. It was very creepy feeling. So I happened to turn my head and look down the hall towards my parents' room, which was pitch black because their door was open. And this feeling just washed over me. And it was the most nauseating. I mean, I felt physically sick. It nauseated me. And it was very overpowering. And I kind of thought, oh my God. And I was very fearful instantly. But at the same time, I thought, if I show fear, whatever it is going to know that it's got me. So I made myself very calmly get up and walk to the sliding glass door, and I opened the door and I let my dog Ginger in. Now Ginger was a little Benji dog. My grandfather knew the people that raised the Benji dogs. They were Dachshund Spitz Poodle mixes and extremely intelligent. But Ginger never growled at anything. She barked all the time, but she never growled. And so she does this little run from the living room into the kitchen into the dining room kind of circular thing, and she does this like 3 times, and then she instantly stops in front of the hallway, and she turns her head and she looks down the hall, and every hair on that dog's body stood on end, and she just growled for a full minute, and then all of a sudden she goes like that, and just like nothing happened. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. And we always had kind of strange experiences in that house. My mother would see like shadow figures. My father would catch little things out of the corner of his eye. My sister did too. Everyone that's ever been in that house has seen something at some point in that house. Another strange experience that happened in that house. This one's actually kind of funny. My mom's mother, her sister, in other words, my great aunt, her husband passed away. His name was Harvey. And when Harvey passed away, his wife, Mary, passed away. And when Harvey passed away, his wife, Mary, passed away. And when Harvey passed away, his sister, my great aunt, her husband passed away. His name was Harvey. And when Harvey passed away, his wife, Mary, passed away. And when Harvey passed away, wish was that he would get to travel around the country and travel around the world. So my great aunt Charlotte had Harvey cremated. Little Harvey goes into a cigar box, one of those old-fashioned yellow cigar boxes. If you're not old enough to remember that, sorry, look it up. And my grandfather did not want Harvey in their home. So Harvey got installed in our garage during my Aunt Charlotte's stay, because my Aunt Charlotte had emphysema. They were both very big smokers, and Charlotte was not in good health. She was probably on the verge of passing away herself. I think she passed away very shortly after this. But anyhow, my grandfather, my granddaddy, absolutely did not want Harvey camping out in their house. So Harvey got put on my dad's big table saw in our garage, which was a disaster. Our house is, my parents were hoarders. So growing up, there was always boxes and packages and stuff. It's crazy. Anyhow, I'm in the kitchen one afternoon, and I hear this, Natalie, Suzanne, get out of here quick. And I'm like, what the heck? And I thought something fell on my dad or whatever. So he was out in the garage. It was just me and him at home. So I go racing out into the garage, and my dad is on the floor madly going, I spilled your Uncle Harvey. Hurry up. Help me get him in the back of the box. So the two of us are sitting there like, sweeping poor Harvey back into the cigar box. And we agreed that we were not going to say anything at all to anybody about it, ever. Like, sworn to secrecy. So at the time, my sister and her second husband were living with us because they were in the process of moving from one apartment to another. Their lease was up. They weren't able to secure another lease. So for a while, they were living with us. They were sleeping in the living room. And my brother-in-law, Lonnie, was very dark-skinned. We're talking like 8-ball type dark. And one day, it was daytime, Lonnie was getting ready to go. Lonnie worked at one of the local hospitals, and he was kind of chummy with several of the doctors, physicians that worked at the hospital. He also had a detailing business on the side, and he detailed the cars for the doctors and consequently for many of the Spurs players, the Spurs basketball team. This was back at the time when David Robinson, the Admiral, was playing for the Spurs. And so Lonnie would get to, get invited to go play golf with the Spurs, go have lunch at the doctors and stuff like that, and he thought this was really swanky. So Lonnie was getting ready to go one day to go out golfing or to go to something. And he comes out of the bathroom, and my parents had 2 couches at the time, and I was raised in a very staunch Church of Christ home. And at the time, we were having church services in our house because we had the largest living area, and there wasn't room for other people. So they had one couch like this and one couch like this. And Lonnie starts walking backwards, turned white as a sheet. So if you can picture one of those little black magic 8 balls, he's very dark skinned. Turning completely white, that was Lonnie. And he's walking backwards, and he's got this look on his face, and it's the middle of the daytime, folks. He's going, and he backed up, and he fell over one of the couches, and he gets up, and he bolts out the door, and my sister, as he's running out the door, my sister's like, Lonnie Keith Blake, what is wrong with you? He left the house. We did not see him again for a full 24 hours. He came back home the next night, right about the time we were having dinner. We were having a late supper that night for whatever reason. And we're all sitting at the table, and my sister's like, Lonnie Keith, what in the world was wrong with you yesterday? What happened? Where were you all night? And Lonnie doesn't even look at my sister. He turns, looks straight at my mom and says, Miss Nay, I saw a man. And it wasn't Mr. John. And my mom goes, what do you mean you saw a man? He goes, Miss Nay, I saw a man. He went into Nana's room. That's what he used to call me, Nana. And I'm like, great. He went into my room. Thanks. So my mom's like, well, what do you mean you saw this man? So he starts to describe this man. Very tall man, big shouldered. He described his hair, salt and pepper, detail. We're talking, down to features, the eye color. My mom says, well, that sounds like my Uncle Harvey. Now, my dad and I are sitting across the table from each other, and my dad's eyeballs fling up, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and I'm just like, secret, shut up. So I'm giving him that look, like, don't you dare say a word. We swore secrecy, none of that. So people have seen Harvey in the house several times since then. You know, and not just family members. I mean, people that have been in the house are like, who's that man down here? I swore I just saw a man walking. Oh, he's in my room. What the fuck's up with that? So things have disappeared in that house. We have torn the house apart looking for them. Nobody can find it. And then you'll walk into the dining room, and there on the piano with a beam of light shining on it is whatever it was you were looking for. Kind of stuff happens all the time. Well, of course, for those of you that watch my personal channel, you know my personal story, and you know that I've always been very clairvoyant. I have prophetic dreams. My dreams are very vivid. I know things. I know when people need to hear from me. I'm particularly in tune with when somebody is in need of help or encouragement in some way. And I always seem to know when to do that. But I also know when there's a problem, when something's not right, when something's going to happen. It's very strange. And my mom always she used to call me a witch when I was a kid. It's kind of funny now that at the time, it was meant to be an insult, and I took it as an insult when I was younger. And I was often told, even when I became Catholic, I discussed my abilities with several priests who told me that it was not from God. It was not a gift. If I could do this, it was evil. It must come from the devil. I should stamp it out. So I spent years trying to suppress this natural skill that I had, and now I regret it, because my skill now is not as strong as it once was. It's still there, but it was much stronger in my opinion, and now I'm spending years trying to redevelop those skills and to reopen myself to those channels and to reopen my third eye and connect myself to the spirit world again in that way, because before I could communicate and now I cannot. And so there are a lot of ways that you can develop a connection to spirit, and that brings me into what I wanted to talk about next, because when you have a connection to spirit, when you open yourself up for that, you do have to be cautious, because not every spirit that's out there is a good one. Not every person who lived was a good person. Not every spirit you contact that seems friendly is going to be friendly, and it's human nature. Think about it, because when you deal with people can be very two-faced. So you have to be very cautious, and you have to be aware, and you have to be willing to open yourself out to it with the understanding that you might come across something nasty, and you better be prepared to deal with it. So in terms of my dealings with the spirit world, one of the easiest ways that you can deal with spirit is this little guy right here, pendulum. This was gifted to me, and I absolutely love it. The coloring, you can't really see it. It's sad, but it's got a lot of beautiful oranges and greens in it. The lighting in here just doesn't do it justice, and I'm sorry. It's these hideous pseudo fluorescent lights that they're making us use now. But what's funny was the person who gifted it to me did not even know that my totem is an owl, and yet that's what she picked out for me. So you can make a very simple spirit board by just taking a piece of paper and writing yes, yes, no, no, or vice versa, and utilizing a pendulum. And you can use anything as a pendulum, but that's a good way to reestablish your connection to the spirit world. And you can start out, and you want to make sure that when you begin that your pendulum is not really moving, not really swinging. So then you would just ask it questions. I would like to contact my spirit guide. Is my spirit guide present? Is there anyone in the spirit world that would like to speak? And it will start to move. Obviously, I don't have a spirit board down here. So, Sunshine Morning Ray, if you happen to see this, dear cousin, little friend of mine, cousin, I would really like to have one of your spirit boards. So if you want to get back on that, because I know it takes you a couple months to make them, I would really love you to make me one. Morgan themed would be delightful. No pressure, Trina, no pressure. But that would be one of the easiest ways to connect. Another way that you can easily connect with the spirit world and really open yourself out to being able to have experiences with the spirit world would be to just be open to it. I like to sit and meditate, spending time in the astral plane, really projecting yourself. Now, astral plane work doesn't just happen to you. And I know that a lot of people say, oh, I just close my eyes and I'm in the astral plane. I never buy that. Unless you've been doing it for a long time, I really don't buy it. That kind of work takes time, and it takes you learning not so much concentration, but a letting go of concentration and a willingness of yourself to open out to the spirit realm. I find, for me personally, I'm most successful at doing dream work or contacting spirits in the astral plane or things like that during the dusk or at night before I go to sleep, when you're kind of in that altered state of consciousness between, you're tired, but you're still awake, you're fully conscious, but you're so tired. It makes a good time for that kind of work. Your mind is a little more free to think on those kinds of things. And then you start moving out from that time and you start moving into times when you're more fully aware, and you can learn to shift your consciousness and move into that plane and contact spirits. So any kind of spirit guide work, guided meditations for dealing with your spirit guide or meeting your spirit guide, is a very good way to learn to contact spirit in terms of not the element of spirit, not the guardian spirit, but spirit in terms of not the elemental, but I don't want to say physical being, because it's not physical, it's spirit, but that pieces of that energy that exist and are there, that are floating about, that were once people, that type of spirit. Again, you want to be cautious. I always like to do some sort of cleansing of the area to cleanse it of any negative energy that may be there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not inviting anything in. And for those of you that like circle casting, because you think circle casting protects you from the evil spirits, let me tell you a little secret about that. Circles are not impermeable. And I say that because if that was the case, you wouldn't be able to get the good spirits in either. So a circle is meant to act as protective barrier against negative energies, but it's not impermeable, and that means that sometimes those negative things can sneak their ways in. So it's always a good idea to release spirits out after you have been doing that. You can say something as simple as to Bane, go back from whence you came, and that will send the spirits back to their spirit world, back to that plane where they are released and they're no longer tied to you. I also like to do a ritual shower after doing any kind of spirit work using a rosemary dragon's blood soap. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I suggest you get on Lady Gravedancer's channel and check it out, because she has a really good rosemary dragon's blood soap recipe on there that you can make with melt and pour soap. And it smells amazing, but two, rosemary and dragon's blood are both known for their cleansing and protective properties, so it works very well in cleansing out anything that might have attached itself to you. Another thing that I would say about spirit work, if you're first starting out and trying to work with spirit and open yourself out to that, is I would not involve other people in it right away unless you have somebody who's mentoring you. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't sit around a Ouija board with your kids just because you do want to be cautious. You can be opening a doorway, and you want to be cautious, and you don't want something attaching itself to your children either. Because just because it doesn't attach to you doesn't mean it didn't attach to somebody else that's in the room. So start out with doing something. My daughter's over here making this face. It's scary how much I just looked like her when I did that. Anyway, she's over here going, gee, thanks, Mom.
No. I look horrible on camera.
So anyway, I'm not looking exactly a beauty today, but bear with me. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I have Charmed season 2. Believe it or not, folks, never watched Charmed before last week, but I've managed to make it through season 1 in a week. Sorry, 2 weeks. 2 weeks time. Now I'm into season 2, episode 5 already. So, what is it? 8 seasons total. So two down, 1.5 down, and 6.5 more to go. So anyway, so when you are dealing with spirit and you're working with spirit, I do say take some protections. I recommend, if you can, beginning spirit work with a mentor or a guide, somebody who can help you through that process and make sure that you are following proper protocol and so on and so forth in terms of making sure you stay safe. But certainly opening yourself to the spirit world is not a bad thing. And you can gain an awful lot of wisdom from those that are free of corporeal boundaries, if you know what I mean. You can contact your ancestors, get in touch with people that you miss, that you could use their guidance and their wisdom, and it can be a great comfort to you, but you do need to be cautious. Now, I know that the primary focus of this video is supposed to be our experiences with the spirit realm. I hope that I've kind of, if nothing else, entertained you with some of the strange things that I have experienced in my lifetime. There have been more, but there's been so many that it would take me, I could probably do an entire week on different experiences that I've had, things that have happened to me. To this day, I still see things, you know, out of the corner of my eye. I'll feel certain things. I'll feel people move my hair, that kind of thing, and it always kind of trips me out. I get these like chills that are just, you know, it's like, oh, that's kind of odd. And what's weird is during that time period when I was really working on relieving that, I didn't get those funny chills, and I've recently started getting them again, so it's kind of odd. It happens to my dad too. So open yourself out, but be cautious. I would love to see y'all's feedback on what experiences you've had. Have any of your experiences been similar to mine? Have you had any really scary or really happy experiences? I mean, how many of you have been able to connect with loved ones who've passed? The closest connection I've had in that regard, and I'll share this one last story, is that my grandma, my dad's mom, I call my mother's mother grandmother and her father granddaddy, and I call my dad's parents grandma and grandpa. And my grandma was her father was a French immigrant. He was the head chef of the Denver Hotel. He was the first person to bring ladyfinger pastries to the United States. So if you like those, thank my grandfather, Broadhag, for that. But my grandma was a bit of a wily woman, and she loved carnations. And now and then, I'll get a whiff of carnations. And I know that my grandma is looking over me. I can almost hear her voice. You're such a kick in the pants, because it's what she used to tell me all the time. But likewise, I also get scents of roses, and sometimes I'll get other smells as well. And to me, that is always a sign. Your very first sense, I don't know how many of you know this, but in the womb, ladies, before you even know you're pregnant, the baby can smell. Our olfactory sense is our first and primary smell. So, sense, excuse me. So whenever I smell something, flowers, certain odors or perfumes, I always know that there's spirit nearby. So if others have experienced something similar, I would love to know that. If you've heard things, voices, something like that, not like, oh, I hear voices in my head, because there is a distinct difference between psychosis, such as disorders such as multiple personality disorder or schizophrenia, where you hear voices and the voices are telling you to do bad things, although not always telling you to do bad things. Sometimes it's just like lots of people talking in your head. There's a difference between that and experiencing the spirit. I do think that there are people who have a very close connection to spirit, and they tend to hear people, but it's distinct. It's not like they're just hearing voices in their head, or the voices are telling them to do bad stuff or things like that. It's like people reaching out for help, or people trying to connect with them in some way, probably because they do have that connection and are able to perceive that. And it must be very difficult for those in the spirit realm to want to contact and connect with us here in the physical and not be able to. And so sometimes they'll appear to you in dreams, and that can also be experiences with spirit. I will often have very vivid dreams of people that have passed away or friends that I need to talk to. I remember one time, one more story, just one more. I'll be like Columbo. And one more thing. I did have a friend who was going through a very bad period of her life, and I kept dreaming about her. I could hear her calling to me. I really need to talk to you. And it was weird because it was like I was dreaming about her calling me and saying, I really need to talk to you. I need to see you. And my going out to see her. And as it turns out, she was kind of in a really bad state and needed some help. She was not in a good relationship and had gotten out of it, but was feeling kind of low and really needed somebody to buoy her up. And I ended up, giving her a call at just the right time. And it was the craziest thing. I don't talk about that story much because it's very upsetting to me emotionally still, because she was on the verge of doing something pretty stupid. And if I hadn't responded, if I just passed it off as if, whatever. I also get things like I will smell a hospital-y smell. I don't know how many of you know what I'm talking about, but especially back in the olden days, in the 70s and early 80s, hospitals used to have a really Lysol-y, weird kind of disinfectant smell. I haven't noticed it quite as pungently in some of the hospitals now because I think cleaners have changed. But I will smell that smell when somebody is either sick, going to be sick, going to be in an accident, or become injured in some way. And it's very weird because whenever I have that sensation, buddy, let me tell you, I'm on the phone calling everybody I know. Is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? I will also just know, another experience that I don't know that it's directly attributed to my experience of the spirit realm itself, but I definitely think spirit is who gives us these skills. It's that psychic connection that we have with all of that energy. And I did have a lady that I worked with at the early childhood intervention program, and I got into work one day and she was not there yet. She had an evaluation in the morning and I did not. So I was at the office before most of the other people were there because we work in teams. It was usually an OT, PT, and an OT and PT, OT or PT, an SLP, and the developmental specialist or the social worker, which she happened to be an LPC, that would go out and do these evaluations depending on what the needs of the client were. So I get to the office and I turn and I look at her little cubby, and I had this distinct feeling that she needed a message. So I wrote on a little post-it note, I just wanted you to know, I just felt like you needed to know that somebody loves you today. I love you. And she was a very sweet girl. So I put this on her desk. I didn't sign it or anything, but I went out to an evaluation because our evaluations were scheduled at 9 and 11. So I went out to an 11 o'clock assessment, and when I came back that afternoon from my assessment, she was in tears. And she came over to me and she said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay, what's going on? Brandy, what did I do? And she said, how did you know? And I said, what do you mean? How did I know? What are you talking about? She goes, I know you wrote this note. She goes, and I have to tell you, this is such a hard day for me because I lost my baby on this day. And I wasn't sure how I was going to make it through this day. And you really helped me. I can't tell you how much your message meant to me. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me. So when you hear that little voice in your head that's telling you, open yourself to that voice, that spirit speaking to you, telling you that someone needs you, don't ignore that voice. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight.